Hello, hello, hello. This is Aurelia Davis, the educator's educator, coming to you on a Wednesday. Wednesday is still spring break for quite a few teachers. I hope you are celebrating your teaching career. I hope you're patting yourselves on the back. I hope you're giving yourselves plenty of credit for what you've been able to accomplish up to this particular point. Hopefully, I hope that's what you're doing. This is the time to do that. This is the time to do that. But I just want to come to you. We talked about problem based learning before. Today, I'm coming to you about uh, how to build critical thinking skills within your students, critical thinking skills. And when I think about critical thinking skills, I go back to when children were taking assessments and taking tests, and it was always the multiple choice, true or false, and that was all that the children were given. Those are the only answers that they could have. My little Nicholas is all twisted up here, but anyway, I'm okay. And so when we were when we were teaching back in the day, what happened? The basic skills. The teacher would give the lesson. The children would respond to the lesson, and then there will be questions about a lesson. So the teacher would stand there and basically give a lecture about a particular lesson, be it maths, science, social studies, or whatever. The children would actually be active listeners as to what the teachers was saying. And then from that point on, they would repeat or give her information back about what she talked about and what she talked about. And now that I look at it, we basically brainwash children that way. Children were basically brainwashed that way. They were basically taught that there was only one answer to a question. And I'm not saying that that is not always true, but I'm saying sometimes you come to uh, answers in different ways. And even though you have one child in John Doe or Betty Doe, John Doe sitting on this side, and Betty Doe coming and sitting on this side, and if you give them the problem of 2 plus 2, and John Doe knows how to take 2 fingers and add them together to come to 4, and then Betty knows how to write down, maybe draw 2 apples in one box and 2 apples in another box and still come to the answer of 4. The answer still is 4. But each particular child came to the answer differently. Differently. In other words, each child's brain was thinking critically as to how to get the answer of 4. Each child was thinking critically on how to get to the answer of 4. And that's exactly what they did. So I had a tendency of coming into my career, I will say maybe mm, about the maybe the 10th year of my career, where I got to the point where I was really frustrated that I expected all of the children to give me the same answer. And I was expecting all of the children to come to the same answer the same way. Okay, I'll say that again. I expected all of the children to come to give me the same answer to a problem. And then I expected all of the children to come to that particular answer the same way. And it sort of frustrated me because me as an adult, I know that as I thought out and tried to solve problems, I solved them different ways and I may not come to the same answer each time the same way. And so I started developing, I had heard this phrase, thinking out of the box, thinking out of the box. And that's what I think critical thinking is, thinking out of the box. We have to be very careful where we have to basically look at each particular child in our classroom as an individual learner. We have to look at them as far as having individual skills, and then those particular skills that they have, they come to those skills differently. They accomplish those skills differently. That's what I'm really trying to say. So it gets to the point where, say for instance, in the same family, you have 2 or 3 children in the same family, and each particular child, even though they may have the same mother and the same father, each child is an individual as to how they learn. each child is an individual as to how creative they are and how their brain works, how they think aloud, and all of those types of things. And these are things that happen even within the same family. So how can we turn around and take a classroom of children and lump them into one big lump box and just decide that this is the way that they're supposed to learn? This is the way they're supposed to, they're all supposed to be, just like cookie cutter houses. You go to a block and every house on the block looks the same. Well, that's not our children. Those are not that's not the way our students look. That's not the way our students look. Each child has an individual's brain, and each brain learns differently. Each brain learns differently, and we have to start accepting that within our how we teach our children. So, getting back to critical thinking skills, I looked at the definition. It says a conclusion reached by gathering information and coming to a conclusion. Is basically from the information that you gathered, you come to a conclusion. That's what critical thinking skills is. And the most important part of a critical thinking is that you're gathering information. You're gathering information. And on Monday, I talked about how we can't decide that children living on the north side is going to think like children that live in the western suburbs, or either in the middle, in the urban city. How do those children learn? That child's experience on the north side is going to be a whole lot different than a child that lives out in southern Illinois, or a child that lives in urban Chicago. Those three children are going to think differently. And if you give them the same problem about something, they're going to come to the conclusion differently too, even though they may have the same answer. But they would have come to that conclusion after gathering their experiences and things that they are familiar with, to come to a particular conclusion, to make put the answer to the question. Critical thinking is broken into three different components: analyze, inference, and evaluation. I'll say it: analyze, infer, and evaluation. To analyze, it means to take it, just like taking a lump of clay. And you've been given a lump of clay, and your teacher say, make a box out of this clay, or build a tree out of this clay. So the clay is just in one particular lump. You're analyzing it. And you're looking at the lump and you're saying, okay, how am I going to turn this lump of clay into a tree? Teacher said, make a tree out of this lump of clay. She didn't talk about color. She didn't talk about shape, but she said, make a tree. So that I just thought of something. The child that lives in the urban city may have never seen a tree before, and they may put together a bush. The child that lives in southern Illinois have seen trees, and they may turn around and build a trunk and then put covering and branches over it. And then that child that lives up on the north side of Chicago, they may have the same idea of a tree that the child in southern Illinois have of a tree. But once those children start putting that particular lump of clay together to make a tree, you're going to have three different objects. Three different objects. One might be a bush, one might be a low tree, one might be a very tall tree that has been growing for years and years and years. But when it finally comes down to it, if it has roots, if it has stems, if it has branches, and if it has leaves, then it is a tree, or a type of a tree, because even a bush is a type of a tree. Okay. So that's critically thinking. That's how a child critically thinks. So the analyst part of it, meaning that they're looking at what they have in front of them or from their experiences, and then they're gathering information in order to develop what they were asked to do, which is to make a tree from this lump of clay. Then the inference is the conclusion. And the conclusion came down to as to the experience of a child that lives in Southern Illinois and what a tree looks like to them. And you know, Southern Illinois, you got that wide open space and whatever, and those trees are growing, and you see these big old oaks way back in the fields and things like that. That might be the type of tree that child that lives in Southern Illinois. You know what that's their experience. And then that child that lives on the north side of Chicago, you know, you have those nice little neat neighborhoods, and there may be just like a basic tree and planted in the front yard that the city built, you know, or planted and everything. And it's small. It's not taking up a lot of room because it hasn't been there that long. So it's going to be a lot smaller than the tree that was in Southern Illinois. And then you have that child that's in the urban city that may have never seen any trees at all. It does not mean they don't know what a tree is, but them to be able to recognize and just know what a tree is on a regular basis because they see a tree every day. That child may not be able to think critically about how to make a tree out of that lump of clay. And so they may just turn around and just see a bush, or they may see a tree that doesn't have any leaves on it because of the particular tree hasn't gotten watered, or it might not be in a park, but it just might be in the front of their house. And because they don't really have water to water that particular tree, their conclusion is that the tree has a trunk, has branches, but it doesn't have any leaves. That's critical thinking. And that's what you want to do with your students. You want to actively engage them in critical thinking. And I have found out, once I taught my students how to think out of the box, when I said that word, think out of the box, I started using that phrase a lot. And what I was really telling them is that everybody does not have the same, everybody's brain doesn't work the same way. And that's okay. That is fantastic. If your brain is brilliant, and then his brain is brilliant, and her brain is brilliant. But in the meantime, if you don't think and come, you know, you don't think, everybody don't think the same way. And so therefore everyone is not going to have wrong answers. Everybody's answer, there might be a right answer in everybody's response. There might be a right answer in everybody's response, which makes it very, very important for you to be able to just feel the freedom to think. Never be afraid. That's another thing I taught my students. Never be afraid to tell me what you think, or to give me an answer, And after a while, what I found myself doing is that I would not tell them that it was the wrong answer. I said, well, you know what? That's close. That looks good. Let's look at that a little bit more. How did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that? You know, and so anyway, they would tell me how they would arrive at the answer that they did. I said, you know what, that's just as close, that's real close, but we want to get a little closer than that. So the encouragement and the skills and teaching them on how to think out of the box is something that is definitely has been taking place and teachers have been doing it more now than they ever did before, especially with STEM. Because basically STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, it sets the classroom up where the children are gathering information. They are evaluating science, they're evaluating technology, they're evaluating engineering, and they definitely are evaluating math. Math no longer is just basically adding, subtracting, multiplying, and then dividing. Is basically calculus. And even on the preschool level, they can get to the point where you're looking at shapes and seeing how many corners a cube has, and how many sides, and how many angles. That's all a part of math also. And so we're thinking out of the box and taking it to the next level, where children can basically be hard thinkers. I mean, in other words, thinkers to the point where they are basically just grasping as much of they have, as much that they have in their minds, and putting it on paper and saying, this might be the right answer. And one particular activity I found out, I gave the children, just the whole classroom, the same problem. I said, the same problem. Your choice is to work with groups. You can work by yourself to come up with the answer. But I want you, once you come up with an answer, share it with a friend and see how close you were. See how close your brains were working together. And they loved it, because it allowed them the freedom to say that Miss Davis said this, my answer is not wrong. My answer is not wrong. And after a while, we have to get to that point where we're telling our children, your answer is not wrong. It's not, it may be going toward the correct direction, but let's look at it again and see what you can do differently, you know. And then what you also do is you give them a problem and give them the answer and see how they can come to that conclusion as far as giving the answer, and see what steps they come to. And if you put 10 children, I mean, let's say 5 children, and give them a problem, and then give them the same problem, and then give them the same answer, you're going to have 5 different ways those students came together. Those students thought on how to get that particular answer. And that's critical thinking skills. That's critical thinking skills. But more than anything else, at this point in time in the school year, you want your children to start thinking very critically about a lot of things. You've basically gotten over a lot of the basics of education, you know, as far as what you're teaching in the classroom, as far as assessments, state assessments, so on and so forth. And you want them to start just thinking out of the box, thinking or doing more critical thinking activities. And this is the time. They have a tendency of being fun. Critical thinking can be puzzles, it can be experiments, all kinds of things, you know. But you want to get your children to the point where they're starting to use their brain more so now, as they're coming out of a particular grade and getting ready to go into the next grade. So you want to encourage critical thinking within these last couple of months that they have school, and you'll be surprised as to what they can come up with. It's interesting. Well, this is Aurelia Davis. Visit me on my website, aureliadavis.com, and just look at some of the products that I've been able to accomplish and whatever. And just basically, teachers, continue to give yourselves credit. You are phenomenal. You are fantastic. And I applaud you in every way. And I love you. Take care and have a great afternoon. Bye bye.